Right now we have with us Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Dr. Jasser is a medical doctor. He's also a veteran of the Navy, and he is a founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Dr. Jasser, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Bob. Thanks for having me back.
Always a pleasure, Doctor. And for the benefit of our listeners, the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, maybe you can tell us about it.
Well, it's a forum we formed after 9/11, has continued to grow, and now we lead a Muslim reform movement. Our focus is to counter political Islamism, if you will, and that belief and identity in Islamic states and the Sharia state. We believe that Islam and Muslims need to go through reform and the separation of mosque and state. So that's our mission, is to separate mosque and state and preserve liberty and freedom through doing that. So we advance liberty, advance ideas of Western modernity, and work to actually counter the very theocratic ideas of not only ISIS, but any Islamic state.
That's so refreshing, and yet the task is so large at hand. Are you making progress?
We really are. I mean, when we first formed, we felt pretty alone in Arizona, and then did some national work and started to get quite a bit of media attention. And then last December, we brought together the Muslim Reform Movement, leaders of 15 different organizations that I had gotten to know in my work through the U.S., Canada, and Europe. And, in a scale of things, do I wish we could fill tens of thousands into auditoriums and demonstrate the sort of groundswell grassroots movement. I do wish that, but that's really a more difficult task as you counter some of the establishments of the Islamic faith globally, including governments like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, and others that have just been enmeshed and entrenched in political Islam. So I think looking at that type of, obstacles, and the left also, which has been part of the apologetics for political Islam.
Yeah.
You look at those major two obstacles, and we've, I think, made a lot of progress.
Well, congratulations. The work you're doing is just so important. Of course, there are establishments right here in the United States that are promoting in their own subtle ways the whole notion of Islamic State, like CARE.
There really is. I mean, CARE pretends to be an Islamic civil rights organization when in fact it's a distraction. They obsess on civil rights issues when in fact their roots are rooted from an organization called the Islamic Association of Palestine in the 90s. They're a Hamas offshoot, which is a Muslim Brotherhood legacy group. And ultimately they soak up the bandwidth of American attention with civil rights so that they avoid countering Islamic State issues, countering the radicalization process, using our community to be victims, and collectivizing our community as simply one a monolithic Muslim group rather than a diverse community of ideas that needs reform. And thus they become tools of the global Islamic lobby, be it the Saudis, the Iranians, or others, as you can see, in who funds their buildings in Washington and who they are silent about in their work in America.
Such important work. And now, of course, President Obama would not mention Islamic Jihad, would not talk about what I consider to be the real enemy. What are your thoughts on Trump's policy? How do you see it evolving?
Well, I see us finally beginning to move from a central axis of countering violent extremism, which has been the Obama and even the Bush mantra before it, was that they didn't want to identify Islamism because the political correctness, because it would offend our so-called allies in Saudi Arabia, and as they look at creating a way to identify what we're fighting, that ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood, and others are all part of the Islamist movement, we should ultimately shift from CVE, or countering violent extremism, to CVI, or countering violent Islamism, because the underbelly of the whack-a-mole program that we've been doing against radical Islamic groups is political Islamic groups. So, radical or militant homophobia, militant anti-Semitism is preceded by nonviolent homophobia, nonviolent anti-Semitism. And it's the same way with radical militant Islamism. It's preceded by the nonviolent Islamists. So when you got groups like CARE that tell their following in Florida or elsewhere that America is the enemy, that America's bigoted, anti-Muslim, etc. That's part of the beginning of the radicalization process. And Islamism needs to be the focus of our intelligence apparatus, our security clearances, our vetting of refugees, and our entire, security strategy, if you will.
Yeah. So the travel ban that Trump has come up with, and apparently he's going to be releasing version 2, the travel ban will just exclude the green card holders. What are your thoughts about that? Right, as a move in the right direction?
Well, I do think the right direction is the fact that we're going to do extreme vetting, which is vetting against those that are not only members of terror groups and violent extremists, but actually start vetting against ideas of those who don't share our ideology in the West, who don't believe in freedom, who believe rather in the Islamic State or have sympathies for Islamist movements. So having said that, there's nothing about the ban that is Muslim, and even the word ban itself, it's a pause from 7 countries. I disagreed with Syria being carved out. I think it should just be a pause for 120 days until we recalibrate how we're going to do the vetting. These are 7 countries that were very hot spots, as identified by the Obama administration, countries that really have unreliable governments, be it Yemen, Libya, Iraq, governments that just are too chaotic to really rely on, so it makes sense to pause there. If anything, I would have added Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, jihadist cauldrons that we need to start vetting against jihadist groups. So I think what happened in the courts and what happened in public opinion courts, if you will, is that some of the verbiage from the campaign where the president did mention a Muslim ban and other things bled over. So rather than looking at what was written on the executive order, they simply made it into a political prop, if you will, for blaming the right for being supposedly bigoted when it really isn't what the executive order was about.
And of course, the protests on the left are just scratching my head. What are these people thinking about? But what are your thoughts? I mean, you see these people who are saying anti-immigrant. There's the claims are, in my view. I mean, the Trump the the pause, as you say, is certainly appropriate to protect us, and yet these people seem to totally ignore the real issues.
Yeah, they are trying. There's an old Arabic saying that your enemies will try to eat you for breakfast before you get them for lunch. And this is what they're trying to do. They know there's more coming. They know this is the first step in a long process of shifting the strategy to begin to vet against ideologies of Islamism. And it's a large global threat that we have from global jihadism, including folks coming from Europe, as we saw with the Christmas attack of an individual that came from Tunisia through Italy into Germany, etc. So, this has to be a global approach, and the left really wants to just agitate, use propaganda for agitation, and do these rallies in order to paralyze the government from moving forward. And I hope, President Trump ignores it. I hope we improve the messaging. I do think the messaging needs to not only be what we're against, but begin to articulate what we're for. We can't lose the narrative of being like my family's narrative, which is Syrian Muslims who escaped persecution and tyranny for freedom and are able to practice our faith more freely here than in any Muslim majority country. And I think that's what needs to be improved on, is the messaging. I think the substance of the policy, I didn't see any problem with it. I hope it gets adjusted a bit to make the executive order clearer. But at the end of the day, this is simply agitation on the left to try to paralyze any progress.
I wish we had more time, Doctor, but I'm going to just reference a couple things. First of all, your book, which I have read, is absolutely terrific for the transparency that you give about your own personal faith, as well as where you stand on important issues. So relevant today. A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. Strongly recommend our listeners and get a copy of the book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, by Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Also, Dr. Jasser, through the Jewish Federation of Collier County, is making a presentation on Wednesday evening, the 22nd. That's this Wednesday at 7 p.m. at Temple Shalom. And I'm going to encourage you to call 263 4205, 263-4205 to make your reservations. They do want to know that you're coming. It's $15 in advance, $20 at the door. There's also a luncheon, by the way, a luncheon reception that afternoon at Old Cypress. To get more information, 263-4205. Doctor, always a pleasure to get your commentary here on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, Bob. Looking forward to being in your neighborhood.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.